Hello. I am trying to pull my ass along for a review of Stnr. And what I've decided to do in this very long and boring video, well, hopefully not that long because I have to go and have lunch, like 15-minute long video, is to just sort of flip through the book and read out a couple of quotes just to get them into my head and just them into a form here. I might then download them and splice them into a review. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how I figure this out. Just to try and give myself some kind of a textual richness to a review, which, you know, I can try. I try every once in a while. So yeah, this is going to have a lot of pauses, and then hopefully me reading some stuff that is going to be useful for a review. Stuff about Gordon Finch, which I don't really need. I think I know what I need. I just have to find it. All right. God, this is going to be completely useless for me for later, but I'm going to at least get them down. Here's Dave Masters talking about the university, page 30. You know, it is an asylum, or what do they call them now? A rest home for the infirm, the aged, the discontent, and the otherwise incompetent. Look at the three of us. We are the university. The stranger would not know we have so much in common, but we know, don't we? We know well. And here is, yeah, and then he's like, Masters talking about Stnr at the university. Nor do you escape, my friend. No, indeed. Who are you? A simple son of the soil, as you pretend yourself? Oh no, you are too among the infirm. You are the dreamer, the madman, in a madder world, our own Midwestern Don Quixote without his Sancho, gambling under the blue sky. You're bright enough, brighter anyhow than our mutual friend, that's Gordon Finch, but you have the taint, the old infirmity. You think there's something here, something to find. Well, in the world you'll learn that soon. Well, in the world you'll learn that soon enough. You, too, are cut out for failure. Not that you'd fight the world. You'd let it chew you up and spit you out, and you'd lie there wondering what was wrong. Because you'd always expect the world to be something it wasn't, something it had no wish to be. The weevil in the cotton, the worm in the beanstalk, the borer in the corn. You couldn't face them, and you couldn't fight them, because you're too weak, and you're too strong, and you have no place to go in the world. Which is a lovely kind of summation of Stnr in the book. And I'll skip him talking about each other, but just, yeah, that, you know, Stnr being one of those in the book. Oh, actually, here, for ease, quickly let's go to the introduction, because it does read out a thing about Edith. Here's Edith. It's a quote from the introduction, but it's a quote of the book from the introduction. Edith. She was educated upon the premise that she would be protected from the gross events that life might thrust in her way, and upon the premise that she had no other duty than to be a graceful and accomplished accessory to that protection, since she belonged to a social and economic class to which protection was an almost sacred obligation. Her moral training, both at school... Well, okay, I'm not going to go into that, because, yeah. I do want to make sure I get to I want to get to the quotes that. Yeah, Stoner first seeing Edith. Stoner paused in the doorway, caught by his vision of the young woman. Her long, delicately featured face smiled at those around her, and her slender, almost fragile fingers deftly manipulated urn and cup. Looking at her, Stoner was assailed by a consciousness of his own heavy clumsiness. That's his first. That's page 47. His first spotting of Edith. Hmm. Okay. Here's in their courtship. You know, Years later it was to occur to him that in the hour and a half on that December evening of their first extended time together, she told him more about herself than she ever told him again. And when it was over, he felt that they were strangers in a way that he had not thought they would be, and that he knew he was in love. Which is like one of those things of like, you talk to someone and it's like, wow, we're really strangers to each other. And that is actually the thing that makes them in love. Um, I don't know if that's a sort of a thing of mystery, really unhealthy mystery. Um, mm, Page 58 is all about Edith's family, the Bostwick family, and how they'd been betrayed by, but had been betrayed. What is this? Yeah, betrayed by false friends, and thus they come to. Yeah, yeah. So that's 58. If I want to go into that. Yeah. So chapter 4 is definitely is is their marriage and honeymoon, and chapter 3 is their kind of their their courtship, and then yeah, chapter 5 is everything falling apart and going to shit really quickly. Um, yes, and then when Edith basically kind of something clicks in her head, and it's like, okay, I want a child, and suddenly there's a passion there. Although the next 2 months were the only time of passion William and Edith Stoner ever had together, their relationship did not really change. Very soon Stoner realized that the force which drew their bodies together had little to do with love. They coupled with a fierce yet detached determination, drew apart and coupled again, without the strength to surfeit their need. Basically, and that's the coupling only takes is it only continues until the point where she is pregnant, and Grace is born, and we have that's yeah, end of the end of chapter 5, and then chapter 6 is we get some stuff about kind of we get yeah on at the very beginning of that, we chapter 6, the very beginning, we get Master's death in the war that Stoner just declines. And then we get to actual we get actual things. Oh yes, we get the introduction of Lomax, um, where yeah, we get we get Lomax. He had come through the door and closed it, and advanced a few steps beyond the threshold. This is page 91. A few steps beyond the threshold where he now stood. He was a man barely over 5 feet in height, and his body was grotesquely misshapen. A small hump raised his left shoulder to his neck, and his left arm hung laxly at his side. His upper body was heavy and curved, so that he appeared always to be struggling for balance. His legs were thin, and he walked with a hitch in his stiff right leg. For several moments he stood with his blond head bent downwards, as if he were inspecting his highly polished black shoes and the sharp creases of his black trousers. Then he lifted his head and shot his right arm out, exposing a stiff white length of cuff with gold links. There was a cigarette in his long, pale fingers. He took a deep drag, and inhaled and expelled the smoke in a thin stream. And then they could see his face. It was the face of a matinee idol, long and thin and mobile. It was nevertheless strongly featured. His forehead was high and narrow, with heavy veins. His thick waving hair, the color of ripe wheat, swept back from it in somewhat theatrical pompadour. He dropped the cigarette to the floor, ground it beneath his sole, and spoke. "I am Lomax." He paused, his voice rich and deep, articulating his words precisely with a dramatic resonance. "I hope I have not disrupted your meeting." Well, it's going to definitely disrupt. It's definitely going to disrupt Stoner's life. Indeed. Yeah, page 98, Lomax actually opens up for a moment, and I think then really resents it later, because he spoke of the loneliness of his childhood in Ohio, where his father had been a fairly successful small businessman. He told, as if another person, of the isolation that his deformity had forced upon him, of the early shame which had no source that he could understand, and no defense he could muster. And then he actually talks about, he does actually talk about kind of his love of reading. Yeah. And escaping in his rooms, and finding gradually a sense of freedom that grew more intense as he came to understand the nature of that freedom. When he told of this, okay, what is it? Yeah, page 98. And when he told of the long days and evenings he had spent alone in his room, reading to escape the limitations that his twisted body imposed upon him, and finding gradually a sense of freedom that grew more intense as he came to understand the nature of that freedom, when he told of this, William Stoner felt a kinship he had not suspected. He knew that Lomax had gone through a kind of conversion, an epiphany of knowing something through words that could not be put into words, as Stoner himself had once done, in a class taught by Archer Sloane. But Lomax had come to it early and alone, so that knowledge was more nearly a part of himself than it was a part of Stoner. But in the way that was finally most important, the two men were alike, though neither of them might wish to admit it to the other, or even to himself. Which, it's an interesting bond that this guy, who's for the most part is really the one of the central antagonists of the book. It's like they do actually have that connection. The death of his father. Stock market failing in 1929. Page 112. He was ready to admit to himself that he had not been a good teacher. Always, from the time he had fumbled through his first classes of freshman English, he being aware of the gulf that lay between what he felt for his subject and what he delivered in the classroom. He hoped that time and experience would repair the gulf, but they had not done so. These things that he held most deeply were most profoundly betrayed when he spoke of them to his classes. What was most alive withered in his words, and what moved him most became cold in its utterance, and the consciousness of his inadequacy distressed him so greatly that the sense of it grew habitual, as much a part of himself as the stoop of his soul of his of as the stoop of his shoulders. So yeah, that's a good kind of capturing of kind of that gulf that he finds, which is definitely something that Archer Sloane also suffered from, and I think Stnr actually manages to bridge that gulf in a lot of things, which is maybe what distinguishes him from Archer Sloane dying at his desk, which seems kind of appropriate for him. Where's this? Within a few moments he was immersed in his work. The evening before, he had caught up with the routine of his classwork, papers had been graded, and lectures prepared for the whole week that was to follow. This is page 121. He saw the evening before him, and several evenings more, in which he would be free to work on his book. What he wanted to do in this new book was not yet precisely clear to him. In general, he wished to extend himself beyond his first study, in both time and scope. He wanted to work in the period of the English Renaissance and to extend his study of classical and medieval Latin influences into that area. He was in the stage of planning his study, and it was that stage which gave him the most pleasure. That the selection among alternative approaches, the rejection of certain strategies, the mystery and uncertainty that lay in unexplored possibilities, the consequences of choice. The possibilities he could see so exhilarated him that he could not keep still. He got up from his desk, paced a little, in a kind of frustrated joy, spoke to his daughter, who looked up from her book and answered him. She caught his mood, and something he said caused her to laugh, and then the two of them were laughing together, senselessly, as if they were both children. Suddenly the door to the study came open, and the hard light from the living room streamed into the shadowed recesses of the study. Edith stood outlined in that light, and unfortunately that is where Edith decides to yoink Grace away from Stnr in kind of a revenge for her own hatred of what her life is, what she is, and his part in that. Thus, really damaging Grace and Stnr's relationship, really damaging Grace herself. Yeah, in a very, very, very sad way. Yes, and then we get the whole thing with Walker, with this young dude who is what the hell is his name? So I know it's Walker. Charles Walker, a second-year PhD candidate who assists Dr. Lomax. Yes, what does it say about him? The young man's left arm hung stiffly at his side, and his left foot dragged as he walked. His face was pale and round, his horn-rimmed eyeglasses were round, and his black, thin hair was parted precisely on the side and lay close to the round skull. Charles Walker, the second-year PhD candidate, is unfortunately the source, the hub of where Stnr and Lomax clash, because Walker is useless. Walker is incompetent, doesn't know his materials, and has basically been kind of coddled by Lomax. Perhaps just kind of a kinship feeling of both having physical disabilities, and Stnr in his kind of purity says, like, no, you'd be disaster in a classroom. You're not thing, and that causes the rupture, and that causes the complete breakdown of their relationship, and of Lomax basically vindictively trying to crush Stnr. Though Stnr is a stone, so you're not going to crush him. Though, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's weird implications of what the relationship is between Lomax and Walker. Yeah, this is like, okay, yeah, Finch basically kind of lays down the law about the situation. He's the overall, he's all overall head, and says, like, we're because like Lomax says, like, he's going to bring charges against Stnr for being grossly prejudiced against Walker. Finch basically lays down the law, saying, like, but this office, yeah, I don't want to hear any more about it, basically, Finch ends up saying. And during Finch's speech, Lomax's expression had gone, yeah, I want to make sure I record this little bit, because I feel this kind of semi-squicky feeling about whatever the relationship between Lomax and Walker is. And it's like, during Finch's speech, Lomax's expression, this is page 172, during Finch's speech, Lomax's expression had gone thoughtful and cool. When Finch finished, Lomax nodded almost casually and got up from his chair. He looked once at Stnr, and then he limped across the room and went out. For several moments, Finch and Stnr sat in silence. Finally, Finch said, "I wonder what it is between him and Walker." Stnr shook his head. "It isn't what you're thinking," he said. "I don't know what it is. I don't believe I want to know." Which is semi-disquieting, in the fact that, we're obviously supposed to have Stnr's back, and that, I don't believe I want to know. It's like, are we implying that they have, like, they're lovers or something like that? And that in this very straight novel, that this is something that's like, the heroes are going, this, I don't want to know about what it's about. It's terrible. And it does seem to be irrational. And or whether it's just like, it's one guy with disabilities, whose body isn't the norm, sticking up for another guy whose body isn't the norm. It's just like that's the just at the end of chapter 10 of the whole thing of that. And I mean, we do have, as we go along, we definitely have Stnr suffering under the persecutions of Lomax, of getting assigned all these classes of really crappy, like all freshman classes, all spaced out over like 6 days, so you can't really have any kind of blocks of time to do anything else. Just the worst kind of, that's the main battle thing. That's the thing that, like, you would only treat a beginning instructor this way. This isn't how you would treat somebody who's got the seniority of someone like Stnr. I am going to leave it there. So I'll put a little bookmark in for myself so that I can do another really boring video of me reading out quotations from Stnr as I'm trying to think about things. Didn't get enough quotations of Stnr's love of reading. I mean, there is actually that really good one of the kinship between him and Lomax about that. And there's also the thing of that gulf of being able to communicate that love of reading, or what we find in these words that we can't communicate ourselves, is really good. But I need to collect more, and I will in another video. All right, more videos later.